AMD might be making mining cards and the RTX 3050 Ti gets leaked. Let's talk about it. Before that, this video is brought to you by World of Tanks. World of Tanks is a fun, free-to-play game centered around tank battles with over 100 million players worldwide on PC. In World of Tanks, you can roll out across open fields, climb steep hills, sneak through forests, tear across deserts, and pick your battles in urban and industrial zones. With over 550 historically accurate destroyers, artillery, light, medium, and heavy tanks, plus over 40 battle arenas, there's always a new way to play. And with the experience you earn playing, you can modify and upgrade your tanks as well. So if you want to play a fun, free-to-play, historically accurate game filled with tons of different vehicles and upgrades, be sure to click the link in the description below and use the promo code TANKMANIA to get premium access for 7 days, 250,000 credits, the premium tank Excelsior, and 3 rental tanks for 10 battles each, the Tiger 131, Cromwell B, and T-3485M. So over on videocards.com, they wrote an article about what appears to be a Linux driver with some leaked information about what could be some potential mining GPUs from AMD, which were originally discovered by Pharonics. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at what they had to say on the whole matter, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it. So starting off, they say, quote, "The first indication that AMD might be developing a blockchain GPU appeared back in October 2020. A new Navi 10 part with a device ID of 731E has been added to the Linux kernel patches. It was clearly mentioned that the GPU would not support DCN Display Core Next and VCN Video Core Next, essentially leaving the GPU without any output capability." They then go on to say, according to a new patch from March 3rd, AMD is now proposing a Navi 12 headless GPU. This processor would also lack VCN, which indicates that it would have a similar use as Navi 10 VCN-less processor. They then wrap up the article by saying, quote, "As noted by a known leaker Komiku, AMD has been working on an RX 5700 XTB, RX 5700B, and RX 5500 XTB variants for blockchain operation since at least November." So yeah, it looks like we have a whole lot of information pointing towards the idea that AMD might actually be producing some graphics cards specifically for mining, which is definitely not a good thing. I mean, if you take a look at what was said in these articles, it looks like these mining GPUs would not come with any sort of display adapters, which is not good because, you know, if you take a look at the whole mining scenario, a lot of these miners do end up buying up gaming cards because they can resell them to gamers, which of course, you know, I wish that they wouldn't buy any of them whatsoever, but at least when they do buy them, they eventually end up selling them for typically a whole lot cheaper so that you're able to purchase them on the secondhand market if you are comfortable with buying, you know, used mined-on graphics cards. I know a lot of people aren't really comfortable with that, but hey, it is an option. Now, this is really bad because that essentially doesn't give you that option if there's no way to get around this. Now, if you do have an Intel processor and people do find a way around this, then potentially, yes, you could take these mining GPUs and you could throw them in a system and then, you know, plug in your HDMI cable directly to your motherboard and do the actual displaying through your processor and then do the 3D rendering on your graphics card. I know that that has been possible in the past, though, with those Nvidia mining cards. I believe they did try and go ahead and lock that out, so I'm not sure how easy it is going to be to get around that, especially with AMD cards. I have no idea, and if it isn't possible, yeah, that's really not good because then that means that you can't buy these secondhand cards, and the only person who really ends up benefiting from this, you know, the miners don't benefit, you don't benefit, only AMD would benefit from this because, you know, I think the reason why they might potentially be trying to do this is because if you take a look back at the RX 580 situation there, back when that mining boom set off, AMD was just absolutely pumping out RX 580 graphics cards as fast as they possibly could, and when the mining boom ended, they essentially were just left with warehouses full of RX 580s, and they couldn't really sell them because all those other RX 580s were ending up on eBay for really, really cheap prices, so AMD had to go ahead and, you know, sell these GPUs for way, way less than they originally wanted to, and yeah, that was really bad for AMD, so I'm assuming what's going on here, and I could be wrong, but I'm assuming that AMD's looking at this whole situation and going, you know, we don't want to have that situation play out once again, so let's try and get around it, and let's try and pump out these cards that maybe don't have any display adapters if this story does end up turning out to be true, and then in that way, we won't have to worry about, you know, warehouses full of RX 6800s or 6800 XTs when they can just go ahead and buy these mining cards, and then they'll never end up on the secondhand market, and then we won't have to compete with the secondhand market. So yeah, that's definitely not good for anyone. And then on top of that, you know, it just creates a whole bunch of e-waste, you know, if you can't actually repurpose these GPUs GPUs other than for mining, then yeah, they're essentially just all going to end up as e-waste, and that's definitely not good for anybody whatsoever as well. So yeah, that's definitely not good. And then the final reason as to why this is not good is because, you know, these GPUs are going to be almost certainly produced on 7nm. Now, it's possible that they could be produced on a different node, but it's very unlikely. It seems like pretty much everything AMD is producing right now is on 7nm, so that means that, you know, not only will this detract from the Radeon GPUs that you can buy, but on top of that, any amount of mining GPUs that are produced also detracts from potential console sales as well as potential CPU sales, because if they're all coming from 7nm wafers, that's just less wafers in general that they can use for console, for CPUs, or for GPUs that you can buy. So yeah, this is absolutely good for no one except for AMD, and I'm just really disappointed that they would try and do something like this. I think it's a big shame, and they're not even trying to block off mining on their regular cards either. I don't know if that's going to be successful with Nvidia anyway. It might end up completely backfiring, but you know, it looks like AMD's doing absolutely nothing to combat mining whatsoever, and in fact, they might be doing the opposite by trying to sell GPUs potentially directly to miners. Now, we'll have to wait and see if this does end up actually occurring, but you know, I gotta say, you know, I'm super disappointed. I really hope they don't end up going through with this, and if you're disappointed as well, let me know in the comments below what you think about this, and if you're really mad about it, make sure to share this video with as many of your friends as possible, because I think it's really important that we get this message out, that people know that this might be occurring, and we let it known to AMD that this is definitely not okay. I mean, this is seriously going to be bad for not only the whole, you know, graphics industry and potentially even leaking over into consoles and CPU sales as well, but on top of that, it's bad for the environment to have all this e-waste just piling up. So yeah, this is not good for anyone, and make sure you share this with everyone so that everyone knows and they can make their voice heard that this is definitely not good. But hey, let's go ahead and move on to some actually somewhat good news. So it looks like the RTX 3050 Ti was leaked over by Momomo US over on Twitter, and if we take a look here, it looks like it's in a laptop, the 3050 Ti, and it looks like it has about 4 GB of VRAM. So, you know, that's definitely interesting to see that it looks like we're probably looking at a GPU with 128-bit bus. And, you know, taking a look at this whole entire leak here, I think that I can actually piece together the whole specs of the 3050 Ti and roughly, you know, where it's probably going to perform compared to, say, an RTX 3060. So if we take a look at the potential specs of the 3050 Ti, what we're likely going to be seeing here is about 2,560 CUDA cores. Somewhere there's about, it looks like it definitely is going to end up having either 4 GB of GDDR6 or 8 GB. It's likely going to be running, I think, probably at about 14 gigabits per second, though they could probably shoot for 15 gigabits per second or even 16 if they wanted. And with that 128-bit bus with 14 gigabits per second memory, that will give them a total memory bandwidth of 224 gigabytes per second. So that's a somewhat low memory bandwidth. So hopefully they do end up going with, say, 15 or 16 gigabits per second G6 memory. But hey, that's probably not going to end up happening, though. You probably will be able to overclock it to that fairly easily. So at least that's good. You might even be able to hit, you know, 15 or, you know, 16 or 16.5 gigabits per second memory, allowing you to get a whole lot more memory bandwidth. But, you know, all that aside, in terms of performance, where I expect this to land is probably going to be, oh, maybe 20% or so slower than the RTX 3060. Might even be a little bit slower than that. If it's 4 gigabytes of VRAM, I would err on the maybe more slower side, but if it's going to have 8 gigabytes of VRAM, that might actually allow it to get a little bit closer, because those games that do actually require more than 4 gigabytes of VRAM, you won't see that performance penalty there. So we'll see what happens. I do think that they will actually end up introducing this card in a 4 gigabyte and 8 gigabyte variant, because it just makes a whole lot of sense. 4 gigabytes for the people who are on a very tight budget, and then 8 gigabytes for people who want to spend just a little bit more, and they're actually wanting to maybe max out some of their games at 1080p. Maybe you're trying to play something like Apex Legends, and you're wanting to play it at like high settings, 1080p, and you want to get, say, 120 frames a second or better. This card will probably allow you to do that with the 8 gigabyte variant. You might have to make a few visual compromises there, but I think this will be a pretty decent 1080p card, and it should definitely get the job done for a lot of those maybe a little bit lighter titles, and you can actually be potentially dipping your toes into 1440p gaming, depending on what type of games you're trying to play. You know, of course, if you're playing some really old game, you could play 4K, but, you know, I think this will give you some pretty decent amount of performance, and it depending on what the price is, it could definitely be a really good card to pick up. If I was to guess, considering how expensive things are, the 8 gigabyte model is likely to come in somewhere around $230 to $250, with the 4 gigabyte model probably somewhere between, say, $180 to $230. Of course, that's a pretty big range. I'd like for them to go to the lower range, but let's be honest here, they're probably going to shoot for the higher range, potentially up to $250 for an 8 gigabyte model. That really wouldn't surprise me. I mean, this isn't just a 50 class, it's a 50 Ti. The 50 class GPU will probably be even cheaper. But hey, we'll see what happens there. You know, either way, it's exciting that we're getting more of these GPUs, because realistically, Nvidia doesn't have have to make lower and lower end GPUs since they're selling out all of their really expensive GPUs. So I'm just glad that they're actually producing something, because there's a lot of gamers out there on a budget who really don't have a whole lot of options right now. But hey, that's just what I think. What do you think about AMD producing mining cards? Does this make you angry, or do you think that it's a really good idea? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and of course, I'll see you in the next video. If you made it to the end of the video, be sure to drop a like. Every time you do so, AMD and Nvidia get more stock. Also, if you want to see more, click here. You won't be disappointed.